The desert sun blazed mercilessly over the jagged rocks of Helman province as Lieutenant Marcus Red pressed his back against the scorching stone, feeling the heat seep through his tactical vest. His team of 6 Navy SEALs had walked straight into an ambush, and now they were pinned down in a narrow canyon with nowhere to run. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks around them, sending chips of stone flying like shrapnel. Marcus could hear the labored breathing of his men. They had maybe 20 minutes of ammunition left, and the enemy fighters surrounding them numbered at least 40. This was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance mission. Now it looked like their final stand. Marcus thought about his daughter's birthday party he'd miss next week, about the promise he'd made to his wife that this deployment would be his last. But what haunted him most was the face of the young Afghan interpreter who had begged to come with them that morning. A man named Rasheed, who they'd left behind at base camp because regulations only allowed essential personnel on recon missions. Think about that for a moment. How many times do we push away the very people who might become our salvation, simply because they don't fit into our carefully constructed plans? Corporal Jenkins took a round to the shoulder and fell back with a grunt. Marcus dragged him behind cover, applying pressure to the wound even as bullets continued to tear through the air above them. The radio was dead, destroyed by enemy fire in the first minutes of the ambush. No one knew they were here. No one was coming. And now that decision might cost them everything. The weight of command had never felt heavier than it did in that moment, watching the life drain from Jenkins's face, listening to the triumphant shouts of their attackers who knew they had the Americans trapped. Then, impossibly, a shot rang out from somewhere high in the rocks, different from the chaotic spray of AK-47 fire. One of the enemy fighters dropped. Then another. The precision was surgical, each shot finding its target with deadly accuracy. Marcus and his team stopped firing, confusion mixing with desperate hope. The enemy fighters began to panic, spinning around trying to locate this new threat. Another shot, another body falling. The hidden marksman was systematically dismantling their attack from a position no one could identify. Within minutes, the ambush had turned into a retreat as the surviving fighters scrambled for cover and fled back toward their vehicles. The silence that followed felt dreamlike, broken only by Jenkins's ragged breathing and the distant sound of engines fading into the desert. Marcus signaled his team to maintain defensive positions, scanning the rocks above them. Who had saved them? For long minutes, nothing moved. Then a figure emerged from the high ground, climbing down with practiced ease, a battered rifle slung across his back. As he drew closer, Marcus felt his chest tighten with recognition and shame. It was Rasheed, the interpreter they'd left behind. Rasheed's face was drawn and dusty, his civilian clothes torn from climbing through the rocks. He'd followed them on foot, staying back far enough to avoid detection, carrying his grandfather's old hunting rifle. When Marcus asked him why he'd risked everything to track them into enemy territory, Rasheed's answer was simple. His younger brother had been killed by the Taliban 2 years ago for working with American forces. The SEALs had protected Rasheed's family, had helped them relocate to a safer province, had treated him not as a tool but as a brother in arms. He owed them his life, he said, and the lives of his remaining family. When he saw them heading into an area he knew was dangerous, where his own village had been attacked before, he couldn't stay behind. He'd grown up in these mountains, knew every rock and crevice, and he was one of the best shots in his valley before the war came. Marcus pulled Rasheed into an embrace, feeling the younger man's shoulders shake with exhaustion and relief. The rest of the team surrounded them, hands clasping Rasheed's shoulders, voices thick with gratitude and emotion. Jenkins, pale but conscious, managed a weak smile. They fashioned a stretcher from their gear and began the long trek back to base, taking turns carrying their wounded teammate while Rasheed guided them through paths that avoided enemy patrols. As they walked, Marcus realized how close he'd come to losing everything because of rigid thinking, because of rules that sometimes mattered less than trust and humanity. That night, after Jenkins was stabilized in the field hospital and the debriefing was complete, Marcus sat with Rasheed under a sky full of stars. They didn't talk much, they didn't need to. Some bonds are forged in fire and sealed in blood, transcending language and culture and military protocol. Marcus recommended Rasheed for asylum, wrote letters that eventually brought Rasheed's entire family to America, stood beside him years later as Rasheed became a citizen, then a college graduate, then a father himself. The rifle that saved 6 American lives hangs now in Rasheed's home in Virginia, a reminder that heroism doesn't always wear a uniform, and that sometimes the people we overlook become the very angels who guard our lives. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that courage and kindness can come from the most unexpected places, take a moment to share it with someone who needs to remember that hope exists even in the darkest valleys. We all carry the power to be someone's hidden guardian. We just have to choose to act when the moment calls. Never underestimate the impact of standing by those who stood by you, of honoring the bonds that make us human. That's not just a lesson for soldiers in distant deserts. That's a lesson for all of us every single day.